All right. Just finished watching Notre Dame Toledo. Final score was, and I'll put it here on the banner for you guys, here with the Notre Dame postgame show at the Voice of College Football, Mark Rogers TV. Hope you're listening. We're live right now. Again, Notre Dame postgame show at Mark Rogers, or at the Voice of College Football, Mark Rogers TV. Doozy of a game. If any Notre Dame fans are in here right now, final score 32, Toledo 29, back and forth battle all game. Frustrating back and forth battle if you're a Notre Dame fan, of course. But, a win is a win. At the end of it, they were able to pull off the 32-29 victory and kind of keep their place or keep their win streak at home that has been constant over the last 3 to 4 years. Let's go ahead and roll through some stats real quick. Weird game for the Notre Dame offense. They come out first drive of the game, pretty much do whatever they want, throwing the ball with Jack Coan. Offensive line looks fine. Backup left tackle Michael Carmody goes down, I believe, either in that first or second series, and they end up, going with their third string left tackle. But anyways, they drive down the field. Michael Mayer, possibly the best tight end in the country, or at least one of Notre Dame's best weapons on offense, at the very least, scores to make it 7-0. Toledo goes down and kicks a field goal on their opening drive. And then from there on out, it was just kind of a weird game for the offense specifically. Yeah, I'm getting some comments rolling in. Why Notre Dame? Why? It's a good question. I mean, it was one of those, like I said, Toledo's a good football team. They're going to be a really good MAC program this year, maybe the best team in the MAC, but still no excuses in that regard. To keep that game close. Kind of just rolling through, like I said, what we're going to roll through what happened. Some very interesting key storylines during this game. And then also, there were some positives, obviously. I mean, they did score 32 points. I think the defense looked really good in spurts, specifically to start the second half. But when they needed a big play outside of the last play of the game, it didn't really happen. JD Bertrand continues to look good as kind of like the backup to Maris Leafau, who's out for the season. They were down a couple other linebackers, Shane Simon, Paul Moala also were announced out for the season prior to this game. And then Prince Colley did not play today either. We don't exactly know the reasons behind that, for kind of some student safety bylaws. But again, we'll just kind of roll through here how the game started. Notre Dame looked great on offense to start the game. Michael Mayer scores a touchdown, on that first drive. Toledo goes down and gets a field goal. And then from there on out, it's just sort of a wacky game. Notre Dame's offensive line could not get anything going. I already mentioned that Michael Carmody went down, so they were down to their third string left tackle. But again, I mean, I don't know if I want to say that the offensive line was soft, but that's what it looked like. There was no push in the run game, at least when Jack Coan was on the field. And when you become a one-dimensional offense, it doesn't matter how good your playmakers are and how good your quarterback is when he has time. You're not going to do the necessary things to win games, or at least win games against the better teams. The spark plug, obviously, for the offense was Tyler Buckner, true freshman, was a 5-star at one time, when he came in, it put a different niche into the offense. I don't think Toledo was prepared for it. I know Notre Dame had sort of been working him into sort of the offense over this past week. But it was sort of news to Notre Dame fans. It was news to the people in the crowd, news to in reality, I think it was news to Mike Tirico and Drew Brees as well. But other than that, when he came in, the running game got going, and that was honestly mostly because he was a threat via the run and the pass, and you saw that as the game went on. He had the really nice play to Chris Tyree for a 55-yard touchdown. I think many people thought that was going to seal the game at one point. And then I get back to where the defense comes in, where they were looking really strong to start that second half, and then boom, 89, 90 yards, whatever the run was, to set them up, and they end up scoring 2-point game. Notre Dame goes down to try to ice the game. Kyron Williams, one of their best players, one of the best running backs in the country, fumbles the ball. Sort of an issue last year as well with him, and that's something that he's been working on. But yeah, you can't do that in that kind of situation, especially when you're playing an inferior opponent at home, and you want to win the game. So right after that, Toledo, of course, goes down, scores. Really nice play design by their offensive coordinator with their backup QB Finn on the rollout, or on the RPO rollout, I should say, to go up. And then what a gritty play by Jack Coan on that next drive. Notre Dame's driving, great throw, great catch by Kevin Austin. That would have been a 15-yard play regardless, because of the defensive pass interference. But they go down, pops his finger back into place after hitting it on a helmet or whatever. And then Michael Mayer scores another touchdown. Avery Davis, the former high school quarterback, makes it kind of like I think probably a broken play, throws it to Kyron Williams, makes it a 32-29 game. And then I think Toledo kind of just shot themselves in the foot from there on their last drive and didn't have a lot of time. So again, Notre Dame ends up pulling off the 32-29 victory. Sloppy game. Offensive line really needs to get it going. Regardless of the fact that they're on a third string left tackle, you have, three guys along that offensive line that are seniors, and Patterson, Kane Madden, and Josh Lugg. Can't happen. Those guys gotta, they got to be the steady part of the offensive line. And in all reality, I think Zeke Correll has been probably their best offensive lineman so far to date. But they really got to get that left tackle spot figured out if they're going to win some games. I mean, they got Purdue next week. Purdue's probably, I don't want to say they're a better program than Toledo right now, but they certainly probably have some better athletes. That's a rivalry game that hasn't been played since about 2013. So Purdue's going to be fired up for that one. And yeah, no, if you're not prepared to play those teams, they're gonna stay in the game, and then they have a big stretch starting with Wisconsin right after that. So go ahead, guys, leave your questions, leave your comments. I'll try to get to a lot of them here. But yeah, I mean, I mentioned last week when I was on the show with Mark at the end of the Florida State game, that I think it's pretty evident where Notre Dame's strengths are. I mean, obviously the tight end plays is great. They have good running backs outside of the fact that the offensive line's not creating holes for the time being. And they have weapons outside, and Kevin Austin, Braden Lenzy, Avery Davis, Joe Wilkins, we'll have a thing, we'll have a few plays here and there. And then I mentioned obviously the running backs, Chris Tyree and Kyron Williams are going to make plays if you give them the opportunity, but the offensive line just has to play better. I think that's the biggest thing. And then obviously outside of the last play of the game, it was Notre Dame turned the ball over 3 times. Toledo had 0 going into that last play. And you can't do that against inferior teams as well, and expect to at least not have them stay in the game. We're getting some shades of 2016 in here. Not sure that's exactly where the program's at right now. 2016 probably loses one of these 2 games, regardless if you want to say Florida State or Toledo are maybe worse than some of the teams they played in that season. So be it. But I think I really don't want to overreact to 2 games. Obviously, there are some issues. I think obviously we've discussed the offensive line. The defense needs to get off the field in key moments and maybe limit some big plays here and there. I don't mind the big plays overall if the attacking defense is going to do what it does. And I think as the season goes on, the depth gets a little bit better. Prince Colley's back at linebacker. You get Jordan Patello back, hopefully. That's going to obviously help. And then obviously just some of these younger guys that aren't used to getting big snap or the majority of the snaps are going to continue to get better as well. So those are a couple things that definitely need to get or need to improve, and starting next week against Purdue. You can't have another close game, overtime game where you're out there and you're sweating the entire game. I'm sweating just talking about it right now. So no, I absolutely think the offensive line needs to be better, and the defense needs to get off the field on just on obvious momentum changing plays. Yeah, I think Thomas, I think me and you both. 5 deaths seems pretty accurate. I know John, if anybody follows John Kennedy of Always Irish, he's someone that always is tweeting those type of things out. But no, this is I think I died multiple times during the game as well, and maybe another 5 times if you include the Florida State game. So at least shave some years off my life. Guys, keep throwing in those questions. Love that we're getting some people in here right now. Yeah, so some positives. Obviously, Tyler Buckner coming in as a freshman showed what he could do. I mean, early on, a lot of it was the run with him, which is fine. Obviously, you're going to have that's a big strength of his. It is running the football. It's what he did in high school. It's what he did. It's what he was known for coming out as a recruit, and he was able to demonstrate that. And when he was in the game, quite frankly, even the running backs, were performing at a higher level. The offensive line wasn't as needed because some of the RPO, and just sort of like the misdirection and just different things like that. But this could end up being something that they have to move to. I think it's well documented that Coan is not, necessarily the most mobile quarterback in the world. I don't think he's a statue. He has shown the ability to move, a little bit, especially when he gets going. He can pick up some yards on the ground here and there. But he's not a guy you're relying on to move the sticks with his legs. And inside the pocket, he doesn't necessarily have the best feet. So getting Tyler Buckner in there when they did in the first half was I think was a really, really interesting move and a savvy move by Brian Kelly and offensive coordinator Tommy Rees. And then they ended up sticking with it the entire game, where they kind of just did this mismatch here and there when they needed to. And then obviously Jack Coan gets that final drive. I mean, he's the vet. They needed to throw the ball down the field. They trust his arm more right now. And he led them on that final game-winning drive. But, I think you almost have to have Buckner in there at times. That has to be part of the offense this year, even if it's just to kind of shake things up here and there. And, especially, like I said, especially if the offensive line is going to continue to be a weak point of this team. Hopefully they can improve as the year goes on. Hopefully Michael Carmody's injury is not, to the extent of Blake Fisher, who they lost for, 8 weeks or so. And they can kind of continue, just improving as an offensive line unit overall. Continuing taking some questions, guys. Remember, this is the Notre Dame post-game show on the Voice of College Football, Mark Rogers TV on YouTube. My name is Nathan Erbach. I'm going to be doing this weekly for Mark, and it's going to be on the main channel. Sometimes it will be on just the Notre Dame channel at times as well. You can find me, like I said, Nathan Erbach. My Twitter handle is just my first and last name, with an underscore in between, of course. So Nathan _Erbach. You can find me there, or you can find me at the Golden Homers podcast with my co-host Mason Plummer, who's always tweeting about Notre Dame as well. So, we enjoy what we do, and we follow the program pretty well. So we know what we're talking about. Good question here by KMA Preston. Moving Patterson to left tackle. I mean, I know that was certainly talked about in the offseason. I mean, I think at one point he was probably the shoe-in to play left tackle. And then it was in sort of an interesting move, probably like 3 or 4 weeks before the season started. Kelly said, "Hey, listen, we need some camaraderie around at the offensive line. We're going to play Patterson where he's been most comfortable, where he's played the last 2 seasons, and been one of the best centers in college football, to be quite frank." So yeah, no, I mean, I don't think he's going to move. I mean, obviously, if the Carmody injury isn't good, I mean, he obviously wasn't out for, he was out for the entire game after he went out in the first quarter. So it's possible that's at least a multi-week injury. If he's out for a significant period of time, you might have to consider it. You slide Corral or Correll, at center. Maybe you put Rocco Spindler in at left guard, and see what that does for you. If you're not going to trust Tosh Baker at left tackle. But as of right now, I think going into Purdue week, they'll probably stick with what they have. And hopefully Carmody plays, like I mentioned. But if he doesn't, then I would expect Tosh Baker to be the left tackle. Regarding a letdown game, I'm not sure. I think with the way they played against Florida State, specifically with it just being a close game, and I think the team overall thinking that they were the better team overall. I'm not sure that Notre Dame viewed this as a letdown game. Obviously, when you're not playing a big time opponent, you see Toledo, across the sideline, or in game, just game prep, during the practice week. It's not going to be, sexy, for lack of a better word. But I think with the way they played against Florida State, I wouldn't necessarily say this was a letdown game. I really do feel like this was, honestly, just 3 turnovers to 0 after, like I said, outside of that last drive by Toledo. And then also just the offensive line really not giving the quarterback any time to do anything. And you even saw that with Buckner a little bit when he was in there. He had to create with his legs. There were times that he wasn't able to get outside the pocket and, and create with his legs as well. I mean, he had some negative chunk yard plays, at times, but no, I mean, I think it's simple. Offensive line needs to play better. I think they need to, look themselves in the mirror, get a, kind of a gut check and, and say, hey, listen, Notre Dame probably doesn't deserve the title of O-line U after the performance the past couple of weeks, but that's what they've been over the last, 10 to 15 years, putting terrific players, in the NFL and having great units, overall. So this should be something that's fixable to an extent, you'd think. And as the year goes on, it gets a little bit better. But yeah, no. For as of right now, I would say it wasn't a letdown game overall. We got some more Jack Coan statue comments. My only thing with that, Johnny, I'm not saying he's a statue in a sense. I think in the pocket, I do agree. And that's where the issues lie when you have an offensive line that's not playing as well, that's not playing well right now. He's not great kind of like with his lateral movements, or not quick with lateral movements. I should say he's obviously a traditional pocket passer. He needs some time, but I also think when he does get going a little bit, I mean, he's not Nick Foles, for example, where it just looks awful when he tries to do anything with his legs. I wouldn't call him. I would even say he's probably better than a Tom Brady. If you want to use another example, when it comes to just moving the sticks, if you need it, 5 yards here and there, it can happen. But overall, yes, I agree. When the offensive line is going to play this poorly, he's going to look more and more like a statue. And a perfect example of that, and I forget exactly when the play happened, but it was obviously when it was a close game, and he missed Mayer on like a short little. Just a short little, under route. And it was on a corner blitz. He had time to move to his left and dump it off to Michael Mayer. And it might have ended up it was probably a touchdown, or at least a huge, huge chunk play overall. And that's a play where if Buckner was in the game, that ball gets out, and it's, and like I said, it becomes that chunk play, or even, maybe he runs the ball or something like that. But when it's a designed run play for Coan, when he has a little bit of space to work with, I think he can pick up some yards here and there. Yeah, and Thomas, I mean, today was certainly a day. Coan did not play as well as he did against Florida State today against Toledo. I think he was a little hesitant at times. One of the things that I mentioned this during the game was there were a few times where I think he had a little bit more time than he thought, but because the offensive line had kind of burned him, earlier in the game, he was playing a little scared from that standpoint. If that makes sense, there were some times where he was, maybe looking down instead of up. Pocket collapses just a tiny bit. Maybe he has, 2 or 3 more seconds to do something with, and then he just kind of goes down, or tries to run and gets a yard or a negative 2 yards and just tries to move on to the next play. So from that standpoint, yeah, he had a poor game. Buckner came in with a lot of confidence and really moved the ball every time he was in, for the most part. So yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't give up on Coan just yet. But at the same time, like, Buckner was exciting, and he was the guy you brought in to hope, to maybe bridge that gap to a national championship. A lot of people have felt that that's kind of been Notre Dame's issue over the last couple of years. Just not having maybe the elite quarterback play that you need against, the Alabamas, the Ohio States when they're not losing to Oregon at home, and, the Clemsons of the world, and, some of those top-notch SEC teams when they're good, like LSU and Georgia as well. So yeah, no, I mean, you can't play the hard feelings game. If you feel like Buckner gives you the best chance to win, I think you have to give him the ball, even if that means just by a game by game basis and just what the flow of the game's kind of going with. And I think today that was exactly what happened. Buckner got a lot of play because of the flow of the game. Yeah, no, Sean, I mean, that's an interesting comment. Obviously, he's not. I don't think anybody's calling Coan the savior. One thing he provides the Notre Dame offense that they haven't necessarily had over the last few years is just the ability to stretch the defense down the field, and we've seen that already over the last, during the first 2 games. He had a couple big plays against Florida State down the field. I think he had 3 touchdown passes of over 30 yards, if I'm not mistaken, 30 yards or 20 yards, or at least airtime. And that was something that Ian Book, I think, did twice during his Notre Dame career, maybe 3 times, but they were always against, Bowling Green, New Mexico, teams like that. And, even today he had multiple throws where, the pass to Kevin Austin to set up the touchdown to Michael Mayer to win the game. That's a throw that typically Ian Book wasn't making on a consistent basis for Notre Dame. The Kevin Austin touchdown against Florida State, that's a really well thrown ball that carried 40, 45 yards in the air. Also not a thing that Book was doing too often. I mean, every now and then when he had Boykin or Claypool on the outside, he'd throw it up and let his big boys go and get it. But Notre Dame doesn't necessarily have that this year. They have Kevin Austin, who's more of a weapon with his legs. And not with his legs. He's not as tall as Claypool and Boykin, and they're not necessarily he's not the type that's going to go up and get it per se, but he can make some chunk yards, or some yak yards, I should say. Yeah, Tony, I agree. Matt Fortuna and Pete Sampson do a great job. Go ahead, guys. Obviously, this is my first time doing this by myself, so we're working through some kinks here and there. And we'll get better each week, obviously. Keep throwing those questions out there. Obviously, it's a lot to digest without some film review and just different things like that as well. So maybe feels like I'm rambling a little bit. But no, if you guys are liking what you're seeing, go ahead and hit that super chat. You can do that either here. You can also do Mark Rogers TV on Venmo, PayPal, I think Zelle as well. He takes all those. Just let him know you're listening to the Notre Dame postgame show. Yeah, all Miles, we covered this. Yeah, no, Kyron Williams, that was something that he needed to kind of improve on from last year. Fumbled the ball 3 or 4 times last year, a couple times in big spots as well. And that's a big moment. I mean, he's one of your 3 or 4 best players, not only on your offense but on your team overall. And that's a big moment in the game, regardless if you're, against Toledo or against Clemson. And yeah, you got to hold on to the ball in that moment, and and don't not have to worry about that last play. Where Coan found Mare in the end zone. So yeah, those are things you shouldn't have to worry about. Like I said, even against the better teams, when you have the ball at that spot with that amount of time left. Tony, that's a good question. I'm not sure on the Patreon. That might be a question for Mark when he does his live. I think he's doing a live broadcast tonight, 8:00 Eastern, where he's going to be taking phone calls and just different things like that. So definitely a good question for him, moving forward. But all right, again, guys, Notre Dame, Toledo. This is the post-game show. Notre Dame won 32-29. You're listening to this at the Voice of College Football, Notre Dame postgame show at the Voice of College Football. I'll be with you here every week. We might go ahead and just wrap this up if we don't have any more questions. One thing I will say, we haven't really maybe talked about the defense too in depth, because the offensive line and the offense, as a whole, was sort of the talk of this week. With Buckner playing for the first time, and the weapons, doing what they do when they actually have the ball in their hands. I really do think that this defense played well overall. When you really dig into the stats, they allowed 2 touchdowns in key moments, of course. So that's where I think they need to kind of get things straightened out. Chunk yards, more than chunk yards, actually, big plays overall. I know, like when Notre Dame went up and it was like 24-16. You're looking at it and you're like, okay, Notre Dame's going to pull ahead. They're going to win this game. Might even win. Might even cover the spread, which was, I think, 16.5, 17. And then boom, 70-yard, 80-yard run. Toledo goes down and scores. It's 24-22. You got to put games away against inferior teams. You got to put games away when your offense isn't playing their best, but they give you that lead. You got to put those games away. So that's the big thing for me. And I've mentioned this, but I know some of you are joining here a little late. I think that is something that's going to be improved. We're in week 2 of the Marcus Freeman defense. Notre Dame has had some bad luck with the injury bug, with, I think, 3 or 4. Three of their top linebackers out for the season. Another one was unavailable today. You can speculate however you want on what that is. Jordan Botelho has been out so far as well. The first 2 games. So hopefully you get some depth back over the next couple weeks. The players continue to learn the scheme, and you get another game that you should win next week in Purdue to kind of tighten some things up before you play Wisconsin week 4, and you hit that tough stretch. So I think the weakness of this team was supposed to be the secondary. I feel like that has actually been a decent bright spot so far. I think Florida State, the corners specifically, weren't an issue. Obviously Kyle Hamilton's maybe the best safety in the country. I think he's the best safety in the country, but I'm sure it's arguable depending on the fans. But yeah, no, I mean, that's 3 out of the 4 that you're going to be playing on a consistent basis in the defensive backfield. And I think, like I said, against Florida State, they played well. And then you're looking at, today, there were some plays that they probably wish they had back at corner. There were some holding calls, some pass interference calls that were a little iffy, maybe here and there. But at the same time, you have, I don't really think they gave up too many big plays through the air. overall. I think there was one, at the very beginning of the game when on Toledo's first drive. But other than that, and that was actually a backup safety with the miscue last week against Florida State. The long offensive touchdown pass by Jordan Travis was also against a safety in Houston Griffith. So overall, I think the corners look pretty good. Kyle Hamilton is going to do, what Kyle Hamilton does. And, and I think Johnny kind of hit it here a little bit as well with his post. Secondaries hit or miss. Hopefully the front seven and the defensive line specifically can create some turnovers and some bad throws and get some picks like they did against Florida State, where they had 3 turnovers. And I think at least one of those was really caused by the defensive line creating havoc, or the front seven as a whole. But no, I think that those are, some areas that, they can continue to improve. And then when the linebacker depth gets, maybe to a more healthy level, and guys are able to learn the just defensive scheme over the next couple of weeks, that's going to help tremendously. So overall, I think defense has impressed me, I think, more than others. Impressed might be the wrong word, but I'm kind of giving them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. The offensive line is the huge concern. It really just is. Their offensive line plays like it did today, and they're going to end up a 8-4, 9-3 team probably, unless Buckner can run for his life and be the savior of sorts. If it improves and they give Coan or whoever's back there more time, they're going to win some games. And that's another good observation, Johnny. Push was okay. I mean, I think in spurts, specifically within, like in that end of the half, early third quarter, or the entire third quarter, I guess, for that matter. I know Foskey had a sack in there. Jason Adamaloa is really turning it on now that he's the starter at the 3 tech position. He's a guy that, I think he caused havoc almost every time I was watching him today. So he can be a really special player for this team down the line. I would say overall the defensive line wreaked more havoc last week. But I don't think the defensive line was an issue today. I don't think the linebackers were really an issue today either. Like I said, Notre Dame really only allowed, 14 points overall, or 2 touchdowns, I should say, overall. One was a pick 6 and a couple field goals here and there. And, you let a team hang around because you couldn't score, early and often. And I think that was really what it boiled down to. All right, guys. Looks like we're starting to lose some people here, but thanks for joining us. We've been kind of going live here for about 35 minutes or so. Appreciate you, tuning into the Notre Dame postgame. Might be on with Mark, later this week before we, before Purdue, just to kind of break this down after we get to watch a little bit more film and stuff like that. But again, thanks for coming on. Again, this is the Notre Dame postgame show at the Voice of College Football. You can see the banner below. Notre Dame 32, Toledo 29 was the final score. I'll see you guys next week for the post-game show for Notre Dame Purdue. I think that's the same start time, and this one will be on NBC versus being exclusively on Peacock, which I know was not to the delight of most fans. So we will see you guys next week around the same time as today. So again, guys, thanks for joining us. See you later.